Okay, so first one we're going to do is law of sines, and the law of sines can be used with any triangle, not just right triangles. So when we were doing basic, we just talked about that you could use your sine, cosine, and tangent, but it only worked on right triangles. But now we can use any kind of triangle. Okay, so remember here we had our basic trig, so we had our angles, our opposites, our adjacents, our hypotenuse. But now we're going to have any kind of triangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out labeling. We've got, let's see here, get that away. Okay, so we've got this angle C and its opposite side C. Angle A is opposite side A, and angle B is opposite side B. So if you'll notice, they're going to work together as partners. So the way it's going to look is, oops, you're going to have the sine of A over A equals the sine of B over B equals the sine of C over C. Or it may be flipped. It may be the side over the sine of the angle, the side over the sine of the angle, the side over the sine of the angle. Now keep in mind you only need two, okay? So you only need two. Only need two. So you may only use these two, or you may only use these two. You're only going to use two at a time. I just want you to see that they're all three going to be proportionate to each other. Okay, so let's start out with this triangle here. We have triangle ABC. They've given us two angles, which we could find the third if we needed by adding them together and subtracting from 180 to get this one. But since they're just asking for this side, then we're going to use, see how we have angle A, side A, angle C, side C? So we're going to use those two pieces. So C over sine of C equals A over sine of A. So then you just plug in the appropriate numbers where they belong. So C is 55 degrees, side A is 8, and angle A is 30 degrees. So you just fill it in. Now, just like any other proportion, it doesn't matter. You're going to cross multiply. So you cross multiply, and you get C times the sine of 30, 8 times the sine of 55. Now, here is where you're going to, just like since we're solving for C, then you're going to divide by the sine of 30. So we're going to divide both sides by the sine of 30. Now, keep in mind when you divide by the sine of 30, it's going to look like this. You do not want to type this in your calculator just like this because your calculator is not going to understand and it's going to get it wrong. So make sure that when you type it in the calculator, you do 8 times the sine of 55, hit enter, then do divided by the sine of 30. That way your calculator will know to multiply all of this, then divide by this, giving you an answer of 13.1. Okay, so in this next one, they've given you, instead of giving you the measure of the angles, they've given you the actual ratios if it were a right triangle kind of thing. So they want you to find the length of side D. Well, since they've given us F, D, and F, then that means that I'm going to use F over sine of F, D over sine of D. So remember, keep in mind, they're working as pairs. Well, we know what side F is. We know side F is 24. We know the sine of F is 1 over 5. So we don't really have to find anything. They've already told us the sine of F is 1 over 5. D is what we're looking for, and they told us that the sine of D is 2 over 5. So I'm just going to plug things in where they go. So since they actually gave us what the ratios were, we kind of lost the sign. So now we can just cross multiply just like we would any other thing. So D times 1/5, 24 times 2/5. Well, what we're going to do here is obviously if we're solving for D, then we would multiply both sides by 5 so that it cancels out. So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, and notice these 5's cancel out also. So now you're just left with 24 times 2, which is 48. So the length of D is 48. All right, here they didn't even give us a picture. They ask us to find the ratio of side P to side Q. Well, they gave me the sine of P and the sine of Q. So if you use the ratios with that, so you've got P over the sine of P, Q over the sine of Q. Well, remember, you know what the sine of P is, and you know what the sine of Q is, so just replace those two with these two fractions. So you got P over 1/3 and Q over 1/4. Well, if you cross multiply, just like any other thing, P times 1/4, Q times 1/3, And now if you want to multiply both sides by a fourth, so I mean 4 over 1 because we want to multiply by the reciprocal, now we're left with, actually I skipped a step here. So if we go from here, you're left with P equals Q over 4/3. So you've got P equals Q times 4/3. Well, if you divide by Q here and then you divide by Q here, you're left with P over Q equals 4/3. So that would be the ratio of the sides. Not the length of the sides, just the ratio of their sides. All right. Then the last one. Well, what happens when they want us to find an angle? You actually have to take one extra step. Okay. So since we're dealing with sides A and C, then we're going to use the proportion or the ratio that deals with sides A and C. So now I'm going to plug in the numbers where they're called for. So A is 55, angle A is 110, side C is 20, and we're going to look for angle C. So just like any other thing, we're going to cross multiply. So you get 55 sine of C, 20 times sine of 110. And since we're solving for C, then here, if this is what we're solving for, then we would need to divide both sides by 55. So if we divide both sides by 55, then that means this is going to cancel out, and I'm going to be left with the sine of C equals 20 times 110 over 55. Okay, now here's the tricky part. Make sure you're very careful when you're entering this in the calculator. My suggestion, do the 20 sine of 110, enter, divide by 55, and then do the inverse sign of your answer. Because if you try to type it all in the calculator at once, so you're going to get this right here will be a decimal. So you'll inverse sign that decimal, and you'll get 20 degrees. So we'll do a lot more practice in class, and we'll look at law of cosines next.